Hi everybody. A lot of people were asking me how I did my Jingle Bells painting, and a lot of you were interested. I'm just going to do a quick little one for you and show you how I did it. First, I got my pouncing tool, Tim Holtz pouncing tool. I put some meadow on there and some black, and where it's darkest, where my center of interest will be, I'll put a circle around there. That'll be where one of the jingle bells will be. And then I just keep reapplying. And I'm going to move this a little bit and get dark over here, because this is where I want the drama, right in there. I also used alcohol ink lift, but I showed that technique on my Facebook page, so I'm not going to do that again, but this texture is very nice anyway. So I'm going to go right to painting a jingle bell. So I'm just lifting off with alcohol at this point, and if it stains a little, because I had a little of the orange on my brush, that's great. If not, it's all right. I see another jingle bell there in my mind. In my mind's eye, I dripped alcohol, so you know what? That'll probably be another jingle bell. It's the way it works. You work with your ink. Don't try to fight it. Work with it. Now I got three cute little jingle bells. Good enough for what we're doing. Is go into a little watermelon, and this is going to be my dark area. And all I'm doing is that half moon of a dark color, just to get myself zoned. I'm going to have reflected lights and everything over here, so I don't want to get too crazy. And I might go a little bit darker with some of the poppy field. Get that in there. But I'm bringing it in a little bit, so this could be a reflected light and I can play with it later. Okay, now I'm going to go into my sunset orange with that dirty brush and some alcohol and just plop that down. This is a warmer color, so it's going to come forward. So I'm just basically making my circles turn into balls. I wipe out my brush, and this is my light side. And I just bring that up and blend it in using it's starting to dry brush it now. It's starting to dry out on me, so I can give it a nice dry brush. Okay, now this one's coming forward a little bit more, so I'm going to go into a little honeycomb and put a little more yellow into this one. Do you see how that popped forward as soon as I did that? That's how, if you understand how your values and how color works, on the color wheel, what comes forward, what recedes, it'll help you push and pull things around. Anyway, moving on. I'm going to put a highlight right about here. And I'm going to get a little of that watermelon and make a little center area around the jingle bell. And they're not always in the same position, so don't be afraid to move the thing in different ways. I'm going into poppy field again and put a little dark underneath. This is already dark, so I need to lighten it. So I'm just going to take a little alcohol on my brush and pull it. And that lifts the seam. The light's coming here, so it'd probably be right about here on this one. People say to me, oh, I can't paint a straight line. Well, if you look closely, none of this is straight. And then I'm going to go back into red. This is the poppy field. And just kind of darken in here again. Reinforce my dark. Just that dirty brush and a dry brush technique kind of coming on this side a little bit. There's less and less ink on my brush, so I'm getting a different value. While I get that value there, I'm going to use it back here at this dark area. You don't have to be real precise. I mean, you can if you want, but why bother? It's not necessary. I'm just dry brushing that little line back a little bit. The brush is almost completely dry. You'd think there's even nothing on it, but there's quite a bit of ink. And I'm coming back and reinforcing that again. In the back here. All right, so that looks pretty nice. I'm going to do this pretty quickly, folks. I'm not going to put a lot of time into it because I got a class coming. And I think you will get the gist of it. I'm going into black right now, and I'm going to make that round part and the line for the jingle bell. I mean, you can put them anywhere you want. It's usually a big round thing and a little line. I'm using my ink rather thickly right now. I'm drying it out up on my palette and then bringing it down. See how many times I do it? Art isn't an automatic thing like a burger. You're not just cooking all the time. So let's give this one right here a little jingle bell. Okay, so now everybody knows it's a jingle bell. Fix that. Okay, so that looks pretty good to me. So let's make it a little more convincing. I'm going to go back into the green and just put in some texture. I'm kind of using my dirty palette, so it's green, but it's black, it's got sepia, it's got all kinds of colors, I don't know. But we'll just put some, we'll just put a little something. Okay. Now I'm going to just take that dry brush. It's pretty dry at this point. I even wipe it on my paper. And then I'll just bring it back here and just kind of push this one back a little bit because there's green on there. Do you see how that pushed back? And I'm just going to soften this one back a little bit on that side. And this will be some little holly or something, who knows. Okay, what I really want is to show you how to do the jingle bell. I'm going to do my highlight right here, so I'm going to reinforce it by lifting. I'm wiping out my brush so it's nothing but a little damp brush and make a little highlight on this side of that bell. A reflected light on this side. That's light coming from here. Maybe a little highlight here a little bit, maybe a little more there. Let it fade away. Let it be hazy. And now I'm just going to kind of break up the inside of the jingle bell a little bit just to make it more interesting. See how much more interesting it is when you break things up? All right. Now I'm cleaning my brush off. I want it pretty dry now because I want to just soften this line. Really learn to dry brush. It's a really good technique. You can make a lot of beautiful effects. A little more reflected light, a little more orange over here. Now I'm going to go back into some of the watermelon and put a little bit more of that in the back one. Giving it a little more oomph. And because these values are similar, you can almost overlap a little bit and you get those lost and found edges, which are very desirable. Just putting in a little darker there. So that's how you do that. I think you get the idea. Pine cones. So I just put a little triangle into some sepia. I gotta juice up my sepia a little bit with some alcohol, because I always work pretty much in a dry palette. So we'll make a little triangle of, and that's the start of my pine cone. You can have another pine cone back here, another triangle. Have it come behind that one. Makes it more interesting. And so anyway, we take that out. These are my dark areas. I want my edges uneven. You never seen a pine cone with a smooth edge, did you? I don't think so. So these are my darks. I'll come back and lighten it up. I'm going to take some of that sepia and put it in here as well. Break up the color. And break that up. And I want to put a little of that dirty brush up in here, and just because this isn't as important. This is my important area right here. This is almost as important. Okay. So this will have a little something there. I don't know what. So I'm going to put out a little more meadow. And I'm going to just kind of throw some dots in here. These are my filler flowers. I don't want to deal with it. It's a little juicy. I'm going to dry it out a little. See, if it gets too juicy, it just opens up, which is fine for the background here, because I don't want too much texture and too much stuff. But in the foreground, I want it darker. So, see how it gives it a little more body? And all I'm doing is just tapping, but it gives the illusion of plants and leaves and whatever. And you can come back with a liner brush and make little pine lines if you want, pine needles if you want, like that. It's just a matter of what you want. And like I say, this is just a down and dirty quickie for you. You can come back and darken in the background and start making some drama. And this one took me a little while to do, so I'm just going to, like I say, make this rather quick. I'm going back into my poppy field. I want to reinforce the red in this back one. And in there, and right in here. And I'm bringing it over so it makes that dark edge. Less and less is on my brush, and I can control the ink a little more now. So I don't care when it gets all kind of crazy like that, because I can come back and fix it. And just tickle it around. Less on my brush, so now I can go back here and it'll still work as a highlight because there's less on my brush. See how pretty that is already? If you lose your highlight, you just come back and put it back in. Put in your little reflected lights. And don't worry about, you don't want it really perfect. You want it a little bit imperfect and shimmery. Looks pretty nice. And I want this a little darker back there. And a little darker back here. So basically that's how you make a jingle bell. The rest of it is just nuance of going back and forth and making it beautiful and all of that. So like I said, this one takes a little while to do, but I think you get the point, and I hope you're going to give it a try. And I'd love to see what you come up with for your own little jingle bell scene here. I'm just going to throw in a few lines to kind of finish this off a little bit. I'm going to switch brushes because that's kind of a bigger brush. I want to use a liner brush now. And I'm going to put something down so my hand doesn't go in it. And get some more ink. And tap in the middle. And then I'm going to also use one of those Ranger pens, because if you're going to make your own Christmas card, you really don't want to spend 3 hours on it. And you can just give little hints of lines. Pine needles. People will think they're pine needles. You don't have to tell them everything. Now the other little thing I really enjoyed on this particular picture was berries. So I just going into poppy field and putting in some drops of red. But I want them to come down to here. So you kind of move. I want you to move down here and make a little cluster of berries there. They'll be a little bigger because this is my center of interest. Make them a cluster. They don't always 1 or 2. They're not, sometimes they're 1 or 2, sometimes there's a bunch, so it's up to you. But what I like to do is make sure you're traveling. And then I highlight one side where the highlights are. And it makes it appear like they're round. See? Pretty easy, huh? You know you can do this. Okay, now I want to just address the pine cones. So what I'm going to do is just take alcohol. Let's see how this works. And they're basically smiles. Look for the lightest area. You can almost see little pine needles there. Little pine cones, pinelets. Just put alcohol and blot. You can also take one of the Ranger, the white pen that I really like that because it's a ballpoint, and you can also reinforce your white this way. And it sinks in a little bit, but I kind of like that because it looks a little more natural. But in the first, when you first put it on, do you see how that works? And then just, and now everybody knows it's a pine cone. And these aren't particularly in any perfect order because there's no such thing as a perfect pine cone. Sometimes they're sideways, sometimes they're this away and that away. Anyway, you can use that, or you can use the lifting technique with alcohol. You can see it already sinking in, and it really becomes part of the painting, which I like. Anyway, I like also using the alcohol and blotting. So I got that going on. I also like it for the pine needles because, like, again, it's the highlights that I'm looking for. And where there's light, there's not much color. Little dots. This is a really great pen because it's a ballpoint and it just doesn't ooze out all over the place, and you get a lot of control, and it's very fine. Anyway, you get the idea around that. You can even get fancy and put little hits of light in your berries here and there. Okay, so that's how you do it. I mean, if you can get real crazy now and just put a highlight in here, and you know, you can do whatever you want. It's your painting. So I hope this gives you an idea on how to do the jingle bells down a dirty fashion. So happy painting and happy holidays.